In the summer of 1994, I decided to prepare for my transition from 6 years of residential practice in a couple of the temples of the San Francisco Zen Center to my new life in San Francisco, finding an apartment and a job, and going back to church by hiking the John Muir Trail from Yosemite Valley to Whitney Portal. And as I was reaching the destination, the climax really of my journey, I approached Mount Whitney from the less traveled west side. And it was my resolved intention to be the first person to reach the summit of Mount Whitney on that particular day. So the evening before, I stopped at Guitar Lake, which so-called because it's shaped somewhat like a guitar, and it's the last kind of official camping spot as you approach Mount Whitney from the west. But I stopped there only to cook the last of my noodles and eat them, and to fill up my water bottle. And then I proceeded on up the trail a ways onto the shoulder of the mountain to somewhere around 10,500 feet or so, and then wandered off the trail onto a little bench where I pitched my tent and went to sleep. And then I woke up just at the very crack of dawn and ate my last power bar and stuffed my sleeping bag and packed up my tent and scrambled back up to the trail, where I saw, to my horror, coming up the trail just below me, a troop of Boy Scouts. But I was in excellent shape, and my pack, which had been 60 pounds when I began the hike up out of Yosemite Valley, was a great deal lighter, and I had spent 20 days at 9,000 feet or higher in elevation, and so I was primed to hit the afterburners and leave those Boy Scouts in the dust, which I did successfully. And so I had my 15 minutes or so of solitude on the top of Mount Whitney that morning, watching the rising sun fill the vast gulf of the Owens Valley with light, and illuminate the peaks of the Sierra Crest for 100 miles to the north, as I recognized them, the land that I had walked through. Now, when Jesus, in our gospel lesson today, sets out to go to the top of the mountain to pray, he is not going there for solitude. He brings Peter and James and John along with him. And there, as we read, he encounters Moses and Elijah, who are revealed in glory as he himself is transfigured, with his face changed and his clothing made dazzling white. And there he has a conversation with Moses and Elijah, who speak to him of his departure, which he is about to accomplish in Jerusalem. Now, this word departure, as it's translated in our text, is in the Greek original exodus, which is a clue to us. If we needed a reminder that Jesus' journey to Jerusalem is a continuation of the great journey of God's people toward liberation. The journey that began with Moses leading the people on their exodus from bondage in Egypt into the wilderness, to the holy mountain to receive the law. The journey which Elijah made as he was fleeing from the persecution of a wealthy and tyrannical and idolatrous king, as part of his struggle to restore God's people to their covenant ways. And so Jesus now takes up the prophetic task of leading God's people to freedom. But he's going to do it in a way that surpasses the frame of national liberation that has characterized the understanding of the Jewish people of their mission up to now. His will be a journey leading all humanity to freedom from evil and oppression and death. A journey of transformation for the entire cosmos as it is transfigured and recreated in the glory of God. And yet, before that can happen, Jesus is going to have to journey back down the mountain to take his place again on the plains, on the dusty roads of Galilee and Judea, to be among sinful men and women, to endure hostility and rejection and misunderstanding and betrayal and punishment and death. And this is what Peter does not understand. When, as is his wont, he blurts something out that is misplaced and mistimed. Lord, it is so great that we're here, because now we can make shelters for you and for Moses and for Elijah. And isn't that so often the way that we are when we experience some taste of God's glory in our lives? When we have some mountaintop experience of beautiful liturgy or profound prayer or rapture in awe at the sublime beauty of creation. We want to cling to that moment and not to make the journey back down into our ordinary, daily, humdrum life, which is where the insight and the truth and the beauty of such experiences must be made to dwell. And as if to bring us face to face with this truth, no sooner do these words leave Peter's lips than he and James and John are swallowed up in darkness. A terrifying darkness. The darkness of their own unknowing, which is the presence of God. Because our mountaintop experiences of glory notwithstanding, God is present in our lives most of the time in darkness. As a faint spirit that speaks and to which we must strain our ears to listen. And that is what the voice in the cloud says to Peter, and James, and John. This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him. So that is what we are setting about to do beginning on Wednesday as we enter this holy season of Lent. To remember again that God who we encounter in darkness, to whose voice we must carefully and patiently and humbly listen. A voice that we can discern sometimes in the Scriptures, which is why we bring ourselves back to them and study them with care, with an open mind, with a prayerful heart, so that Christ can speak to us, not in the literal substance of the words, but in their spiritual depth, communicated to us in spite of our need for certainty. A voice that we listen to, not only in our songs of praise, so often are reflections of our own need to justify ourselves, but also in our tears of loneliness and grief, in our suffering, and most especially in the cries of suffering of our neighbors, the poor, the bereaved, the oppressed. The voice of Christ, the chosen Son of God, speaking to us through them. The voice that speaks when we can let go of all of our urgent, hasty, frantic needs for stimulation, for the latest news, for the satisfaction of our restless desires and wants, when we can let off the gas and find stillness even for a moment. Surrender our own agendas and simply open ourselves to silence, the darkness in our hearts. Not the darkness of evil, depression, and wickedness, and sin, and selfishness. The darkness of God's presence that eludes all our efforts to conceive of glory. This journey of Lent that we undertake each year, following Jesus on his journey to Jerusalem, is one where we accept, again, that having seen the light on the mountaintop doesn't mean that we get to evade our own struggle with evil, and depression, and the powers that be in this world. We don't get to escape our own suffering, our own limitations, our own mortality. But we go in simple trust that Christ has made this journey before us. This journey that leads through suffering, through death, through the surrender of everything we think we know about God, into the luminous darkness of holiness itself.